500 years before Columbus set foot on Caribbean shores, a different kind of explorer had already carved his name into American history. But this story was buried beneath centuries of European mythology, lost in the shadows of a more convenient narrative. This is the tale of the first European to truly discover America. A Viking warrior whose courage opened a new world, only to see his legacy stolen by history itself. The year was 1000 AD. While Europe cowered in the darkness of medieval ignorance, the Norse had already mastered the art of ocean conquest. From the frozen fjords of Scandinavia, these seafaring warriors had spread across the known world, raiding, trading, and settling from the Mediterranean to the Arctic Circle. Among them was a man whose very existence was forged by exile and defiance. Erik the Red had been banished from both Norway and Iceland for murder. But where others saw punishment, Erik saw opportunity. He sailed west into the unknown, discovering and settling a vast land he shrewdly named Greenland. It was here, on this harsh frontier, that his son, Leif Erikson, came of age. Unlike his father, Leif was no mere raider or exile. He was educated, diplomatic, and driven by something more than conquest, curiosity about what lay beyond the western horizon. In the year 1000, following tales told by a merchant named Bjarni Herjolfsson, who had glimpsed unknown lands while blown off course, Leif assembled a crew of 35 men. They would sail into the void where medieval maps warned here be monsters. What they found would change everything. After days battling treacherous seas, Leif's longship struck land. First came a desolate shore of flat stones and glaciers. Helluland, the land of flat stones, likely modern-day Baffin Island. Then forests thick with timber, Markland, possibly Labrador. But it was the third landing that would make history. Vinland, a land so fertile that grapes grew wild, salmon filled the rivers, and winter barely touched the earth. Archaeological evidence suggests this was Newfoundland, where the remains of Norse buildings still stand at Lens aux Meadows. For the first time in human history, Europeans had reached the Americas. But Leif and his Vikings were not alone. This land already belonged to someone else. The Norse sagas speak of the Skraelings, the indigenous peoples who had called these lands home for thousands of years. The first encounters were cautious, marked by curiosity rather than violence. Trade began, Norse iron and tools for indigenous furs and knowledge of the land. But the peace was fragile. Cultural misunderstandings festered into mistrust. The Vikings, accustomed to taking what they wanted through force, clashed with peoples who understood the land as sacred, not something to be possessed. Violence erupted. The sagas tell of battles where indigenous warriors, fighting for their homeland, proved fierce and determined opponents. Unlike the divided kingdoms of Europe, these peoples knew their terrain intimately and fought with the desperation of those defending everything they held dear. The Norse, despite their reputation as invincible warriors, found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Their superior iron weapons meant little against enemies who struck from the shadows and vanished into forests they knew like their own bodies. After several years of intermittent settlement and conflict, the Vikings made a fateful decision. The land was rich, but the cost in blood was too high. They abandoned Vinland, retreating to Greenland, eventually back to Europe. But the memory lived on. For centuries, the sagas kept alive the knowledge that lands existed beyond the Western Ocean. The Norse had touched America and withdrawn, leaving behind only ruins and stories. Then came 1492. Christopher Columbus, sailing under Spanish colors, stumbled upon Caribbean islands and declared himself the discoverer of a new world. The irony was profound. Columbus died believing he had reached Asia, never knowing he had found America, yet history crowned him as the great explorer. Why was Leif Erikson forgotten while Columbus became legend? The answer lies in timing and power. Columbus arrived when Europe was ready to conquer, colonize, and exploit. His voyage launched an age of empire that reshaped the globe. The Vikings had simply been too early. Their discovery led to retreat, not expansion. But there was something else. The indigenous peoples who met Leif Erikson were still free, still sovereign over their lands. They could resist, could drive invaders away. By Columbus's time, European diseases and internal conflicts had weakened many Native American societies, making conquest more feasible. The Norse discovery of America was remarkable not just for its achievement, but for what it reveals about possibilities lost. Had history unfolded differently, had the Vikings established permanent contact between worlds, might colonization have taken a different, less devastating form? We will never know. But in the ruins of Lanceau Meadows and the ancient sagas that preserved the truth for 1,000 years, we find proof that America's discovery is more complex than any schoolbook dared to tell. Leif Erikson reached America 5 centuries before Columbus. He met its original inhabitants as equals, not subjects, and when resistance proved too strong, he withdrew rather than commit genocide. History belongs to the victors, they say, but sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that were never claimed.